Hello, everybody. My name's Sarah Lee. I'm the Regional Advisor for North East and also Ops Lead and manage some of the team. And I'm pleased to be able to introduce Tom Quilter, who is the Programme Manager for the Information and Advice Service Network. And I'm going to hand over to Tom. So over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Sarah. I was just saying at the start, I'm not as used to Zoom these days as I am to Teams. You might have to give me a call. It just took me a few clicks then just to even go off mute. So if that's going to be the way of things, it might just take me a couple of minutes to navigate myself around. Nice to see everyone. Thank you very much for having me at your session. Just to say, Sarah, it's over here in Wales, just Wales. It's also quite a nice day, so that's always a bonus. Right. I'm just trying to share my presentation again. Can someone let me know if that's up and everyone can see that and that's all working all right? Fantastic. Okay, so as Sarah mentioned, my name's Tom Quilter. I work for the Information Advice and Support Services Network, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about SENDIAS services, give a little bit of a background to them, and talk a little bit about the challenges some of them are facing, and then talk a little bit about the relationship between parent care forums and SENDIAS services. And what they can look like, especially when it's working well, and how things can be done to support that positive working relationship. It's a little bit of a background as to who I am and who the Information Advice and Support Services Network are. I'm hoping that most people here are aware of their local SENDIAS. But when I'm hoping you know all about them. But the Information Advice and Support Service Network back in 2014 when SENDIAS services became SENDIAS services. Before that, they were parent partnership services. The DfE decided that there was a need, considering the sort of impartial, confidential, and arm's length nature of SENDIAS services, for an external sort of contract to support that network of SENDIAS services, to make sure that they're connected to each other, to make sure that they can support each other in a way that possibly they wouldn't find that same sort of level of support within their local area, considering they have to be impartial and arm's length and confidential and can't just pop down the corridor and ask for sort of casework support from a different colleague. So DfE put out a contract for to fund an information advice and support service network, and the Council for Disabled Children, which is part of the National Children's Bureau, was successful in winning that contract. It's not a huge contract. We're quite a small team. There's only 3.2 of us at the moment. So there's Daisy, myself, Jai, and then we have our colleague Thejasri, who works with us 1 day a week. So we're not a huge team, but our role is to support the national network of SENDIAS services. And what we do within that is we report on the sort of national network. We look at the trends within SENDIAS services, and make sure everybody who needs to understand sort of the pressures, the challenges, the growing demand on services, as well as looking at funding, service user feedback, and a few other bits and pieces, which I'll get into later. We also provide training for SENDIAS services that goes above and beyond the core offer that they should be receiving from their local areas, through either their local authority or through their outsourced service. And we also provide information advice and support for services for commissioners and for anybody else who might need it as well. So I'm hoping everyone sort of is aware of their SENDIAS and sort of hopefully has done some sort of work with them. But just to give you a bit of a background to them, so SENDIAS services or special educational needs and or disability information advice and support service, they're statutory services. So every local authority must have one. And they are sort of the law behind them is detailed in Section 32 of the Children and Families Act and Chapter 2 of the SEND Code of Practice. And their role is to provide free, impartial, arm's length, confidential, legally based information, advice and support to children, young people and their families about matters relating to special educational needs and or disability, including on education, health and social care. So what do SENDIAS services have in common? They are all statutory services. As I mentioned, they must be able to meet their local authority.
Oh, Tom, you've gone very silent and frozen.
Just give him a bit longer, I reckon, because I've had internet connection issues this morning as well. I feel like there's something in the water.
I was just wondering if anyone had any good examples of working with their SENDIAS that they might want to share with everybody.
Yeah, or just any, I think that's a good question, or just any input from you guys on the call as to how you might like to use this session if we can't get Tom back, because we don't want to waste people's time.
Hello, Heidi.
Hello, I'm from Ealing Parent Carer Forum. Good morning, everyone. Just a
Hi,
very
Heidi.
quick morning. Just to very quickly say that we work quite closely with our SENDIAS organisation. So they come to most of our coffee mornings just to give parents an opportunity to have a chat and ask any questions. And it's just nice for them to kind of put a face to a name and an organisation. So they like to come and be part of our coffee mornings. So it's quite nice. And we've run lots of EHCP troubleshooting sessions with them and that kind of thing. And they're always really happy to sort of do those joint ventures with us, which is great. So yeah.
That sounds brilliant, Heidi. That sounds like a great piece of joint working. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and also I guess that you can gather a bit of perspective on the themes that parent carers are bringing up, whilst they're also getting some sort of an answer for themselves as well.
Yeah, so we tend to we have like issue sheets lying around as well on the table, so we can see from that where the issues are, and then we'll try and run some information sessions around those, or do like a specific session with SENDIAS or one of our like MenCap or one of our other organisations. So yeah, they're really useful.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. Jane, I think you're next in my list.
Hello, hey, yeah.
Hello, Jane.
Hey, Sarah, you okay?
Yes.
I suppose for a question for us, I mean, we've had I've been working with SENDIAS for like forever since we started. We started on the Parent Partnership Service, and as the years have gone on, their service seems to get less and less due to funding. And I don't know. I'd just be interested to know what other forums are doing in respect of, if we're looking at other service offers, we'd be saying, oh well, we need to fund it appropriately, blah blah blah, and just stuff. And I just think, I wonder what other areas are doing regarding that. And it seems now the parent partnership, well, our IAS manager, she now also manages like the Children's Autism Hub, and she can't do, and she was doing the IAS role sort of nearly full time, and now she's doing both roles, and it seems to be, and obviously they've changed the remit, and they do, so it's understanding what their remit is now, I suppose, across education, social care, and health as well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's a question that was asked by another forum that I was going to raise with Tom at the end of his session.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, for Jane's question, if any forums had experience of it, and have you done anything to overcome this? Please feel free to speak up, because I may not see extra hands. So I've just had a comment from Gemma in Northumberland saying that their SENDIAS has low capacity, parents waiting 11 days for callback. Or can their PCFs be offered training to run group sessions on popular subjects like that?
Yeah, see,
That's an interesting thing.
Yeah, our SENDIAS, they run group sessions for SEND support, but parents, they tend to deal with, the parents are tending to deal with more sort of cases like, tribunals and really, serious, top level sort of issues, and the general issues. I mean, we've got a parent rep who's IPSI trained, so they, we tend to sort of mop up some of that really, but then is that our role to do that, or is that a case of SENDIAS not being appropriately funded?
Jane, we do raise it at a national level quite a lot that, the SENDIAS services were funded. And then as we know that funding got taken away and the local authorities were supposed to take that up. And that varies really greatly across nationally. It's a very different picture. I don't know if you've seen the SENDIAS report that they did recently. We could probably put a copy in the chat as well, a link so that you can see about, how little funding SENDIAS services get, and the demand, of course, is going up and up and up. I don't have a magic answer about how you can fund the SENDIAS services, but I think I would just say it is being picked up nationally, that the LAs didn't pick up the funding in the way I think the national government expected them to. But as we know, LA funding is a massive thing at the moment, and what the answers are going to be coming out of that, it really isn't clear at the moment. There isn't any information on it, but it doesn't really help you. But just to let you know, it is being talked at a national level that, there probably does need more funding for the SENDIAS
Yeah.
services, along with
Okay.
you guys as forums.
Thank you.
I think it's also about recording the parents who can't get the service that they need as well. So sort of to record
Yeah.
the need that isn't being met.
Yeah.
Sounds like a,
And making sure you feed that into your partnership boards,
yeah,
which
Yeah.
I'm sure you already
Definitely.
do.
yeah.
And just there was a good comment in there. Oh, there's lots of good comments in there, but there was a comment in there from Samwell just saying that you're working towards a group of IPSI trained parent carer representatives in your forum. I mean, there's a question in there as well about how many staff members does your SENDIAS have? I imagine that might differ depending on area.
And there's
I
one
think that's
over
actually
here
in the
that-
SENDIAS report. When I find the link, I'll put it in the
Yeah,
chat.
yeah, that would be great.
There's one here, I don't know which area it is, but they're saying that their SENDIAS has 5 staff and parents normally get a call back within 5 days. And they also have a monthly coffee morning. So there's different ways for people to get information. So it sounds like some of the things that you're doing with SENDIAS, like, yeah, I know someone talked about how they had SENDIAS at the coffee mornings. Yeah, but I don't know if that's possible if they're so stretched, Jane.
We've got a
But
couple of
maybe-
others with
Yeah,
hands up. Does that answer your question, Jane, or should we?
Yeah. They do drop-ins, but the drop-ins tend to be for people going to tribunal level, and I think it's sense support. And then I say, well, what about sense support plans? Can they come and see? And they go, no, we can't have. We offer them a workshop instead. But then I think it's a shame because then they're sitting here at our hub, and they've had like one parent in 3 hours, and I just think, well, they could be seeing more parents, couldn't they? So I think there's a bit of work there to be done there. But I think if they open up the doors to send parents, to send support level parents, then I think the concern there is, they'll just be overwhelmed with this, with the support. So yeah.
Well, it's a really mixed picture because someone is saying SENDIAS has 2 staff, one off sick, so it must be a real struggle for some areas, and others have 3 part-time staff and weekly drop-ins, but they seem to and understaffed, so it seems like quite a dire picture in some areas.
It does vary from area to area how they set it up, though. It is quite varied. That's the main thing.
Okay, well, next on, thank you, Jane. Next on the list is Sharula. Hello, Sharula.
Good morning. Good morning. I have a question to ask you. Actually, 2. One is in the minimum standards. There is this strategic functions 2.1, which says that each IS without additional LA or CCG or host body roles is based solely within the service. And what do you mean by without additional LA or CCG or host body roles? What does that mean?
Sharula, I would love to answer you, but I'm from Contact, so I'm not from SENDIAS. But Sarah Clark, what's your view?
Hi, Sarah. I would be the one to ask you that question, wouldn't I?
I would try. I think my understanding of it, but actually Tom is the person and Daisy are the right people to answer these questions. So take it with a big pinch of salt. But my understanding is that funding for SENDIAS services should come from health as well as the local authority. So they do actually have a remit to cover and help with CETRs. So in some areas there is joint funding for SENDIAS services that helps stretch across it. And also there should be some funding around the advocacy. It is a bit hit and miss across the country. But again, I'm not the expert and I may have interpreted that particular point, Sharula, wrong. So please don't hold me to it.
Okay. My other question is that I have learned is that quite a few of the services are saying that they are qualified for the Bar Council, and they're putting it up.
Qualified for the what?
Bar Council.
Bar Council. I've not heard that one before.
Yes. 2, 3. Well, my local service were putting it on their website to see that they were saying that they were accredited for, their qualification was accredited for the Bar Council.
Ooh.
And is that correct? So I just wanted to know.
That's definitely one for Tom and Daisy.
Yeah,
I'm not sure on that one at all.
Okay.
I would imagine because IPSI doesn't come across in 3 training levels, you can do 1, 2, and 3, if I remember rightly. I haven't done any of them.
We'll
maybe
find
1.
out.
But I think that's, yeah,
Because
I'm not sure.
and I'm just going back to, because my interpretation, just sorry, Sarah, just going back to that first point where it says 2.1, each IS has a manager based solely within the service or without additional LA, CCG or host body roles. I understood, and please correct me if I'm wrong, when you say host body roles, you do the service just for yourself, but you're not facilitating roles that the other groups can do, for example, the PCF, like host facilitating for PFA. You know, if the IS service won't be facilitating PFA services or hosting those events. Is that the interpretation of that? I just wanted to clarify.
That's
we're
another.
going to have to wait for Tom,
That's
because I
another
really
Tom
don't want to give you
question.
the wrong information, Sharula, and I don't know it well enough to give you that sort of
Thank you.
guidance. I am
Thank
really sorry. Well, let's wait for Tom and pray
I
he comes
know.
back.
Tom's got a lot of questions to answer when he comes back. We've got a
And
couple
then-
of questions to go and see if there's any more. Nandini, you're next. Thank you, Sharula, by the way.
I was just wondering if PCFs are part of the steering committee of SENDIAS, and do you sort of kind of not monitor their caseload or anything, but anything to sort of help with the local authority to make sure that they are doing their job right? Because we did have a SENDIA, previous SENDIAS did have a steering committee, and PCFs and local authority representatives used to be part of that, sort of like slightly like contract management. Do any PCFs be part of their steering committee? That is one of my questions.
Lots of forums are part of
Yeah.
their steering group for SENDIAS services. I think.
But let's see what the comments are.
Did Sue want to come in? Oh, yeah, lots are. I mean, locally we're part of our steering group. We have been for, gosh, over 10 years, I think. We've been a part of it for a very long time. So yes, there should be some, and there should be other parent carers as well, usually on the steering group, so that they have that oversight and look at what's working and what's not working.
And
because currently we were excluded from being part of the steering committee, saying it was not needed anymore. So with this reply, I think we'll try and reiterate it a bit more. I have one more question. Can I ask one more question?
Yes, of course you can, Nandini.
I mean, we also have a funded advocacy service, and sometimes there's a crossover between SENDIAS and advocacy, where parents who are unhappy with SENDIAS straight come to advocacy, and sometimes it almost feels as if we are treading on each other's toes, because advocacy then lands up taking up educational issues. So does anyone have any opinion on that? Because SENDIAS can be stretched, they just do issues, they don't work towards outcomes. Whereas advocacy sometimes tend to work longer with the parent. Does anybody face that scenario in your borough or local authority?
Well, I think Tom would probably be able to answer that better, where the lines are between the two, and explain that in much greater detail. So it might be better that's for a Tom question, so that he can give you much greater clarification on where the two roles are differentiated. That might be more helpful.
Just to flag on the forum having a representative at the steering group, just to say that, you know, years ago forums and SENDIAS used to have an MOU to outline how they would work together. So that might be something to sort of either, you know, sort of bring back or see what other forums are doing. And if I think from some of the monitorings, I think some forums do have MOUs with their SENDIAS service.
Worth sharing some examples of those, Sarah, if we have them, or even the old one.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
See what we can find, actually, because if people are saying that in their monitoring, we could follow up with them and just ask, couldn't we?
Yeah,
that might be a handy action.
Terry, do you want to ask your question or
Hello.
your examples?
Hello. I just feel like you might want me to leave the meeting. I am SENDIAS. Okay. And
Hello, Terry.
That's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I work for the local authority SENDIAS, but we have an extremely strong relationship with our local forum. And the intention was that for both of us to come today, because we work so well together, But unfortunately, the forum chair hasn't been able to get here yet. They're caught up in a meeting. So we hoped to gain from your forum today, and learn from everybody else, but equally to share how we as two services supporting families work really well together. So I'm happy to leave if you feel I shouldn't be in it, given that my parent carer forum chairs.
Oh
No,
no, please.
no, it's actually, I think it's
You're
useful.
gold
Do you have,
dust.
yeah, do you have an MOU with each other, an agreement together?
Yes, we do have an agreement. We've always had an agreement. I mean, and lots of questions that I've been listening to, I could have answered many, but hadn't introduced myself as who I was. And
Oh,
actually,
feel free, Terry.
So I'm just like sitting here thinking, hang on a minute, I just need to tell you who I am and why I'm here. But this is about how strong our working together is and addressing those problems that I'm hearing, i.e. lack of staff. For example, I'm the team leader, my SENDIAS, but I've not got a full-time contract. So we're actually in total, I think it's 1.2 people, but both of us are part-time. But therefore, we've had to rely quite heavily on our very strong forum for some of the things that we're not able to deliver. It's as simple as that. We can't deliver the whole remit, but we've found a way of them delivering with us providing the legal side and the individual support, whereas they have the reach in membership to be able to provide breadth in training. So we're sort of trying to make it work for our circumstances in our local community, what works for our local community. So sorry, I don't.
We do exactly the same, Terry. So I have a really strong relationship with our SENDIAS services. We help support their drop-in sessions. We run joint training sessions as well. So we do all the admin around it so they don't have lots of time dealing with that sort of stuff. So yes, there are lots of forums that work really strongly with their SENDIAS services, and it works really well. And then there are other forums that struggle to access the services. So I think it's quite a varied picture, so which is why most people are here today.
Yeah. And it's triangulation. The forum collects themes, but equally by virtue of the work we do, we know the themes, and that provides the evidence in the strategic voice of the forum moving forward that their themes are triangulated. Because invariably the local authority will ask me, have you got anything, what's your themes? And it triangulates, and therefore it adds to the progress that can be made when you've got that sort of evidence.
I really agree. It works really well working together.
Yeah, I can remember back when we worked in the Northwest. I don't think they're on here, but one of the forums had a really close relationship with their SENDIAS, and it really supported them to gather their themes. But it also meant that their engagement went further because you were getting your answers, your individual answers as well from families, which it's hard to keep asking people to tell you their experiences and not give any advice or guidance back, isn't it? It's near on impossible at this point. So yeah, I'm just typing something in the chat about I'll still put it in there, but just if you have got an agreement that you could share with us or anyone else on the call, I'll pop the email address in the chat, because it might be good if we could just collate some of that and then work with the NNPCF to share it if it's going to be helpful for people.
Absolutely.
Okay, I wanted to share an example that we used in Parent Participation Matters month, where the Buckinghamshire Forum supported and worked very closely with their SENDIAS and made a case for, more staffing, and they managed to reduce waiting times and increase the staffing and made some videos so that the SENDIAS could focus more on complex cases. So that was a nice example. I'll try and put the link in the chat.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
That sounds great. Terry, if you're able to hang around, would you be able to answer any nice questions that come up?
Yeah, I'll do my best. Obviously, Tom's much better. Obviously, he provides all our training, but I do know some answers to some of the questions that you've asked. Yeah.
Thank you for being here, Terry.
Thank you.
Sue Redmond.
Sorry, the other lady, I'm Sue Redmond. I'm from Full of Life in Kensington and Chelsea, and basically we were already providing the service of the parent. Sorry, my brain is gone completely. Before it was known as the unfortunate title of IAS, which was actually not a very clever job title from the DFE to give anyone. We were running a similar service for education. And so we developed our own services, family support service, and then carers advocacy service, because we saw the lack of support when children were transitioning from children to adult services. And then when the oracles came out from the DFE and decided families need support from 0 to 25 or whatever, we were already delivering these services. We were commissioned by the local authority to deliver the education side of things. We were commissioned by social services, or by the local authority again, to deliver family support service. So that deals with all the form filling and whatever else. We were already then commissioned by health to deliver a carers advocacy service, because we were finding the gaps in support for families. We then basically had all of the team trained up to look at education right the way through the whole journey, if you like. And we deliver the IAS service, but we'd already developed it under a different name. And that, as the other ladies were saying, the issues we're finding from those services directly, as well as from our parent forums, because we're a parent managed organization and we run our parent forums, they then triangulate any information or whatever is happening on the ground that goes back into the Children and Families Executive Board, and we make sure that people hear from the front line. And, you know, we just crack on and do it and keep things real. So our posts are part-time. The IAS service, Alison is part-time, Julia is part-time, and Sam is full-time. So the carers advocacy service is full-time. And it covers everything from preparing from adulthood, the carers advocacy service, in terms of education and colleges, as well as out the other side into the dark side of adult services or non-services. So brace yourselves for that, because that's a whole other world. And the family support service is referred into via the clinicians from both Cheney Child Development Centre and St. Mary's. So once a family has a diagnosis, our name is put on the bottom of the letter if they're Kensington and Chelsea residents, in the same way as if they're Westminster residents, the parent forum there will be put onto their bottom of their letter to contact. And that's one of the ways we're able to basically ensure families have the, you know, the support and the understand the system that they've landed themselves in, really, because it's, you know, it's a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. Yeah. And from that, then basically we developed services, we see gaps and stuff, we put pressure on people, you know, so triangulation of that information builds the tangible evidence. It's not just 1 or 2 parents going off on one, losing it because of this, that, and the other. Well, no, it's a very clear needs that we're able to match and monitor, and then go back to the local authority and to local councillors and health as well, basically to make sure that people get the support that they need, to be honest with you.
Thank you, Sue. That's a really interesting example of one organisation providing everything.
Well, you know, we were set up to support families. So we didn't need, I'm being really blunt, we didn't need the Children and Families Act to cause kind of the chaos, to be quite honest with you, that it caused. If people were listening to local people on the ground, then things will happen that's local. So although we were, Nandini will tell you, we were the tri-borough, and then we're the bi-borough, the 3 very, very different villages with 3 very, very different groups of people and dynamics and cultures and all the rest of it. And in actual fact, if we've kept it local, then that has been our strength, because we're tangibly meeting families. And that's the most important thing. You know, my daughter's 33 now with drug-resistant epilepsy. If we hadn't started our day service for people with this level of need, all of the people here would have been in a treatment and assessment unit, because everyone, I think one of the things that all of you need to be careful of is that preparing for adulthood is not just about going to college and apprenticeships. Some people cannot do that. So what are the day opportunities and the day services that are ahead when these children become adults? And the skills basis of the staff is something that you need to be thinking about now, because in our experience, it's taken us now, nearly 15 years for it to actually come around and us to have an awful lot of annoying conversations with people in adult services. And I think, dare I say it, we're kind of starting to get there a little bit, but it's the kids with complex needs that you need to be watching out for and seeing what's ahead of there.
Thank you,
Because
Sue.
it's not right.
I'm just going to interrupt you there because Tom is back.
I'm really sure I was talking away on the presentation, and then it wasn't until I got to the end. How far through the presentation did I get before?
Not very far.
So apologies again, everyone. Okay, let me start again. So sorry. So SENDIAS services, the statutory services, and they must be able to meet their local authorities' legal duties for information, advice, and support. The legal duty is on the local authority to oversee this and make sure they have the funding capacity to do so. And that's regardless of how they're commissioned. So SENDIAS services, statutory services, local authorities have a duty to information, advice, and support to children and young people, and they meet this through their SENDIAS service. The Information Advice and Support Service Network, SENDIAS managers and other stakeholders, including parent carers, also co-produce the DfE endorsed minimum standards for SENDIASs. They're not yet statutory, these minimum standards, but they're considered best practices by services, by us, by DfE and others as well. So basically, SENDIAS services, they're all underpinned by a legal duty, as well as minimum standards that DfE and Ofsted endorsed. But SENDIAS services differ hugely as well. So there's 153 local authorities in the country, and each are served by one of 151 SENDIAS services. The setup of services vary hugely. There's a team out there with 0.8 full-time members of staff all the way to nearly 14. Population covered ranges from 10,000 to about 480,000. And geographical area covered ranges from 12 kilometres to around 8,000 kilometres squared. Funding per head of the 0 to 25 population that the local authority funds their SENDIAS service ranges from 45 pence to £4.81. So there's a huge range in funding for SENDIAS services. And 72% of services are commissioned in-house, and 28% are outsourced. And 67% of services are jointly funded, up from 7% in 2019. So what do we do in the Information Advice and Support Service Network? We develop and maintain the national standards for SENDIAS services, and we do a lot of policy work like the intervention levels. We connect and communicate with all services, so we put them in touch with each other through things like the e-forum, which they all have access to. And we also travel around and meet them at regional meetings and training and events. We commission training for SENDIAS services that goes above and beyond the services core training. So we commission training such as their legal training, which not everyone in the local authority would get, but SENDIAS services receive through our budget. And we develop resources and tools to support SENDIASs in their work. We also collect, analyse and present data to build understanding and evidence around SENDIASs, and we support services directly as and when is needed. The national picture of SENDIAS services. So what I wanted to do today before my technical difficulties was go through, first of all, a bit of the history of SENDIAS services, a bit of a snapshot of where SENDIASs are at now, and then sort of hopefully finish with a bit of a chat about PCFs and SENDIASs, their working relationship and how best practice can look. So an average SENDIAS service would look a bit like this when you consider all the data across the country. They'd have around 4 members of staff. They'd cover around 111,000 0 to 25-year-olds. They'd be funded £1.68 per one of those 0 to 25-year-olds. And they'd cover about 830 kilometres squared. They'd deal with around 2,000 helpline inquiries. They'd also support around 1,600 cases. We call them interventions. So individual pieces of work where a child, young person or family have asked that service for direct support. That service would also input to 91 tribunals, directly support at 12 of those, and then they'd do that softer work too. So they'd put on training for parent carers, children, young people, professionals within their local area, and offer around 244 spaces per year, and have about 1,900 resources downloaded from their website as well. SENDIAS service, so you can see that there's a real challenge for SENDIAS services at the moment. So since 2019, the amount of helpline inquiries has gone up by nearly 200%, the amount of casework by around 350%. Inflation in that time has gone up by 25%, and the average funding increase for a service is only 70%. And because of cost of living and inflation and all the rest of it, that equates to only a staffing increase of around 37%. So basically services are trying to do 200% more helpline inquiries, 350% more pieces of casework, with an average full-time staffing increase of 37%. So we can see that the challenges are seriously rising for SENDIASs and not at the same level as funding. Our services to self-report to us around the minimum standards and their compliance and ability to meet them as one way of tracking how that funding not keeping in line with rising pressures is impacting on services' ability to do their role. And we can see that although it's reasonably steady, there is definitely since that 92% in 2022-23. It has gone down a little bit, and we would be expecting things to be going in the right direction rather than in that direction. And we know that SENDIAS services can have a hugely positive impact in the local area that they're in, and with the parent carers, children, young people that they support. Here are a few sort of examples. At the moment, I'm writing the service user feedback report, which I do every year. It's always my favourite report to write because there's always just loads of really positive things to read, which is always nice to see. I won't read all of these because I'm really aware of time because of me messing up with that Zoom call. And so in terms of the quantitative data that we get around the service user feedback, so we ask services to provide around 50 pieces of sequential feedback. Or as you can see, they end up giving us more than that. But they basically ask these 6 questions on the right here to all of those who access their service, and they ask them to give them a score out of 4 against each question, and then we ask them to send 50 sequential pieces to us as a way of sort of making sure that we're getting a good snapshot. And then you can see that those scores are generally very high, with the lowest being 3.4 out of 4 and the highest being 3.75 out of 4. My favourite stat is that 3.75 out of 4, because even so we know that because of the work of SENDIAS services, because they are impartial services, they're not always able to make the difference a parent, carer, child, young person might want them to do, because they can only sort of go by the law and sort of inform around the law. But what I do like is to see that even when those who've accessed their service feel that a difference hasn't been made, they would still, a good proportion of those would still be likely to recommend their service to others. So I think that's a really positive stat to see. We also monitor Ofsted reporting, and we know that since the inception of SENDIAS back in 2014, they are one part of the Children and Families Act that's often seen to have worked well in terms of meeting its sort of goals and objectives, and that's sort of reflected often in Ofsted. We know that not every Ofsted report over the last however many years that is has been wholly positive, but often, as last year, SENDIAS services are mentioned either positively or with some positive areas, but also a caveat of demand outstripping their ability to sort of work with absolutely everybody, and the need for them to be funding better, which is always a really good thing for us in our role to see, because we can use that as a tool to push for better funding for SENDIAS services. We always share this stat wherever we go, just to sort of hammer home the point that a well-funded SENDIAS service saves local authorities money. And we do know that local authorities right now are seriously struggling with money. So we know that to convince them to fund their services as well as we know they need to, we do need to make sure that they understand as well that actually SENDIAS services save local authorities money. An average service will report that they support through sort of informal mediation and improve relationships between families and professionals, that they can support the avoidance of around 48 tribunals a year. If the Guardian are reporting that that an average tribunal costs around 8,500, then a SENDIAS services last year alone sort of potentially saved local authorities around 61 million in tribunal costs, and the combined cost of every SENDIAS service is around 24 million per annum. And we do hammer home the point within this that children, young people, families absolutely have the right to tribunal, that it is a tool that needs to be in existence in order to challenge at the highest level when things haven't gone right, but also they are expensive and stressful and not a lot of fun for anybody involved. And actually, by utilising SENDIAS services in order to make sure that local authorities get things right first time, and have the sort of relationship where they will actually take on board that they have sort of these legal responsibilities, And we hope that by doing that, then that we can sort of eventually reduce tribunals as well. And I saw a couple of hands raised. I'm not sure whether that's from earlier, or does someone want to jump in there? Or shall I carry on?
Could I possibly ask a question, please?
Yeah, good.
Just on the basis of what you've said so far and the slide I'm looking at the moment, would it be fair to say that the local SENDIAS should be giving advice about tribunals and, where at all possible, working with parent carers and the services to try to avoid the need going to tribunal?
Well, because of the role of SENDIAS service, they should always be talking about tribunal, because all their role is, as an impartial, arm's length confidential service, all their role is to inform and make sure everybody understands their rights and responsibilities. And because tribunal is an absolute right for families to challenge decisions, SENDIAS will always make sure families understand their right to tribunal. But it is also worth mentioning, we feel, that actually the biggest reason we know, because of the tribunal results and the way that they find favour. The biggest reason is that local authorities aren't getting things right first time in the way that they should be. So actually, SENDIAS services supporting families to understand their rights and local authorities to understand their responsibilities saves tribunal numbers, purely because if things are done right and as they should be, then there isn't the need for that costly, stressful dispute resolution down the line.
Thank you.
Okay, so SENDIAS services and PCFs. So I've gone through a little bit quicker than I planned, but hopefully I've everything has made sense so far. So in terms of SENDIAS services and PCFs, it's worth sort of mentioning that they have similar goals, aims, and outcomes. They want the best outcomes for children, young people, and families. They want everybody to achieve what they are legally entitled to, and they want to make sure that professionals and local authorities understand their responsibilities. And they have different responsibilities and methods of delivery, but we also know that by working together, they can really support each other to meet those sort of goals, aims, and outcomes. One part of that is both SENDIAS services and PCFs. They're essential and rich sources of information. So a lot of the time, people are accessing their SENDIAS and they're accessing their PCF where things aren't going right. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it's sort of, there's a whole host of other reasons, but they will have information about where things aren't going as well as they should be. I really don't like any of the corporate speak that you hear, but pinch points is a phrase I end up using because it does make sense, and both SENDIASs and PCFs are going to understand where the pinch points in a system really are, and what can be done therefore to sort of improve services and support for children, young people, and families. Services and PCS and SENDIAS services and PCS can do fantastic work together, and there's lots of examples of some amazing work that they have done together, improving communication and reach for both the PCF and the SENDIAS. Part of the SENDIAS's role is to make sure that everybody knows that they exist, how to access them, and be able to be accessed by everybody. And parent care forums are going to be essential for them to understand how to reach everybody within a local area. And SENDIAS services are also going to be able to support families that they come in contact with around accessing their PCF. There's lots of examples of co-produced, co-written, co-delivered training by PCFs and SENDIAS services, and events as well, like information fairs. And there's examples of co-produced resources by parent care forums and SENDIASs, and that goes back to that sort of the fact that PCFs and SENDIASs are such essential and rich sources of information. They're going to know what resources are most needed within a local area in order to improve sort of understanding and to empower children, young people, and families to understand everything that they are legally entitled to. There's that challenge and support around best practice, which is always an essential part of what SENDIAS services and parent care forums do. And there's that supporting that shared understanding of each other's needs and goals. The minimum standards for SENDIASs, which I've referenced a couple of times, 3 of them have parent care forum have parent carers within them. So just from a best practice point of view, we'd expect SENDIASs to always be engaging with parent carers within their local area, and that's including designing, commissioning that SENDIAS service. It's making sure that there is a steering group or advisory body that's overseeing that SENDIAS, which includes service user groups, includes parent carers, and includes children and people. And we'd also expect that information advice support service to work with local partners, including local parent care and young people's forums, in order to influence, inform, and ensure best practices happening as far as they absolutely can. Some of the challenges within sort of that relationship between parent care forums and SENDIAS services can be that they are set up differently. Parent care forums absolutely don't need to be impartial, whereas SENDIAS services do. Confidentiality in terms of information sharing can be a challenge. Arm's length working, similarly. There is also those situations where there has been a breakdown in relationship previously between the parent care forum and the SENDIAS service, and it's about how that can then be built back up, underpinned by that sort of understanding that everybody is doing what they're doing in order to improve outcomes for children, young people and families within a local area, and that positive working relationship is the best possible way to achieve that. And there's also ensuring a shared understanding of roles and responsibilities and aims and outcomes between that SENDIAS and that PCF. So good practice can look at a variety of different ways, but it can include steering group membership, making sure that there is parent carer representation on that SENDIAS steering group. And like I say, there's examples of great co-produced resources, events, training, and lots more. Information sharing done in a way that respects confidentiality. So sort of looking at themes, examples can include, SENDIAS and parent care forums both sharing that they're getting lots of feedback and lots of referrals regarding EHC needs assessments, and therefore what we need to do is make sure we do a piece of work with the local authority or develop a resource for parent care forums around that. And you guys and your SENDIASs will know where those pinch points are. Championing with other stakeholders and making sure everybody understands each other's roles and the benefits of working with each other. And supporting each other sort of through in-depth understanding of setup, responsibilities, shared goals and outcomes. And all of this can be very usefully underpinned by a little bit of policy work, such as setting up a memorandum of understanding between parent care forums and SENDIAS services, which is, for those of you who haven't seen one, is just a document that lays out, aims, outcomes, goals, methods of working together that both a PCF and a SENDIAS can sign. Which can then sort of avoid any sort of misunderstandings between the two groups. So next steps. So our role as the Information Advice and Support Service Network is to support SENDIASs sort of from a national sort of central perspective to be able to be in the best position to meet their statutory and best practice standards. We know that a positive working relationship with a PCF is integral to that. And so what we want to do going forward is to have a bit of a think about what we can do centrally that might support relationships across the board. We know that in lots of areas, this relationship between the PCF and the SENDIAS service is very positive and works very well. And there's some fantastic examples of work that's been going on around that. And we also know that there is a few examples where there has been more of a breakdown in relationship. And we want to know what we can do as the Information Advice and Support Service Network to support around that. So thinking about whether it would be useful for us to develop and publish some case studies around sort of where things have been going well, and to develop some template resources such as memorandums of understandings, to put on a webinar, possibly a joint webinar, a co-produced webinar. We had when I was down in the southwest at the because all the SENDIAS services are sort of broken up into regions. Their regions will have managers meetings where all the managers from that region will get together and talk about things that are happening in their region. I was down at the Southwest regional meeting last month, and they had their regional PCF rep there presenting on some of the work that they've been doing with their SENDIAS manager. And it was really, really useful to understand and listen to. And especially because it was an area where actually the relationship between the PCF and SENDIAS had previously not been positive, and the work that they'd done to rebuild that was fantastic. So there's options for jointly delivered, jointly written webinars, or joint face-to-face events as well. And what we want to do to begin with is to develop a survey for both PCF and SENDIAS services to really get to the core of what would be useful for us to produce in order to support sort of the relationships between PCFs and SENDIAS services. So I've just got a couple more slides, and it'd be great if we've still got time to have a little bit of a discussion as to what might go in that questionnaire, what might be useful questions to ask in order to really sort of boil down to what we could produce in order to support that joint working that we know can be so positive when it works well. Further information, so I know these slides will be circulated or already have been circulated, and all data that I've sort of shared, it's all on publicly available reports that we've written that can be found on our website, and more information as well can be found on our website. So if you did want to get any more data, any more information, have a look at our resources and our reports, and you can find it all on those website links. So I've gone through quite quickly because I was just aware of time, but has anyone got any questions about anything I've said? And if not, then it'd be great to have a little bit of a discussion about what we could ask and what we could be looking at developing centrally as the Information Advice and Support Service Network that
Tom,
may support.
Can I just
going
check?
forward.
Have you got time? Because we're nearing 1 o'clock, I just want to make sure that you've got time to go over. We're fine to kind of carry on if that's okay with you.
Absolutely fine by me. I've got a 1:30. I'm joining a steering group, and
Okay.
so I've got 25 minutes. So I've got time for a cup of coffee. And I apologise again for whatever I did.
No, don't worry, Tom.
They're not coming out
Yes.
good.
So if I can, is it okay to ask Sharula? You've waited a very long time with your hand up. Do you want to ask your question? And you might want to ask Tom the 2.1 question that you referred to earlier.
Yes, well, I wanted to make sure that Tom was able to complete his presentation. So as I'm
Thank you, Sharula.
Tom, I wanted to ask you, I think we did have a conversation previously. The strategic functions in the minimum standards, it says each IS has a manager based solely within the service without additional LA, CCG or host body roles. What does host body roles mean?
So host body role would be if that it was an outsourced service. So if the service wasn't part of the local authority, if it was an outsourced service, to say it was commissioned, say I'm trying to think of a organisation at random, say Bernardo's. Bernardo's run a couple of SENDIAS services in a couple of local areas. So we would expect the SENDIAS service to both to have a manager that was always purely within that SENDIAS because for confidentiality reasons, and that applies whether that's within a local authority or whether that applies if Bernardo's are running it. So in a local authority, you would expect that the SENDIAS manager was just a SENDIAS manager, wasn't also, sitting on a panel for support services or whatever else. And if it was Bernardo's, you would expect that SENDIAS service manager to again be a SENDIAS service manager rather than have multiple roles within that organisation. And so that the host body role just purely means it applies whether it's local authority or outsourced.
Just to clarify, does that mean that the SENDIAS manager should not host, say, for example, if the local authority is doing a program on PFA, they should, and I'm not talking about hosting the training, sending out the authorization email, looking at who's going to be attending these trainings. Is that what you're talking about, or is that just too technical?
I mean, I wouldn't be able to tell you like whether that particular, but I mean, if it's about the role. So if they are, they should just be employed as a SENDIAS manager. So the idea being because there's been examples in a local area where the SENDIAS manager is like 0.75 of their role is SENDIAS manager, 0.25 is family support coordinator. But the problem there is if the service has to be confidential, which it does, then you have somebody who's bridging two services, so they can't be confidential, and that applies whether it's a host organisation like Bernardo's or a local authority. I did see a question pop up about SENDIAS services being legally trained, so I just want to mention that. They're not solicitors, and they have access to legal training, and so it is different things. So the information they give is not legal advice. It's why we call it legally based advice. So they offer information advice and support based on all their training that they have access to, but they're not solicitors.
Just to add, one of the questions that came in earlier when you weren't here was around some SENDIAS services are kind of saying on their website that they're qualified for the Bar Council. So if you've got anything you can Hi.
I mean that's we have had well, I mean if it's some, then we'd like to know who else, but it's not. Senior services aren't qualified for Bar Council. No, that was just the one time that we've addressed that was a misunderstanding by the SENDIAS.
Okay.
So they're not. And if there's any other examples other than the one that I know of that being said, please raise them to us. Because it is a misunderstanding. There was a time where the accreditate the IPSI training, the legal training that we commission for SENDIAS services was accredited by the Bar Council, and that has been misinterpreted by a new manager coming in. But it's certainly not the case. But it's just a misunderstanding.
Thank you, Tom. Right, were you going to ask some questions of everybody?
Well, is there any more questions? I can see some things popping up on the chat.
I've got my hand up if that's all right.
Of course.
Gemma. Hiya, Tom. I have put it in the chat, but I'm just really keen to get an answer from this. You mentioned that you commissioned training for the SENDIAS role, which is obviously IPSI and other things. Would you consider commissioning like the parent care forums to do that training as well? Because it's quite expensive.
We would absolutely love to, but obviously we can only do things under the parameters of our contract, and DfE fund us to support SENDIAS services and SENDIAS services only. We have pushed for them before, DfE, that is, to provide additional legal training for local authorities, because us and local authorities and everybody else seems to feel that if everybody understood the law, that could only be a good thing. But it is, like you say, very expensive. We will always be pushing that everybody should have access to this training. But our contract, unfortunately, is very much DfE funding us to support SENDIASs, so we can only use the money that they give us on supporting SENDIASs at this stage, I'm afraid.
So would that even be if the SENDIAS is struggling to actually, commit to their service level agreement?
In any, I mean, in terms of what we can do, we can only support SENDIAS services. Otherwise, we'd be using public money in a way that it's not allocated for. If a SENDIAS was struggling to meet a service level agreement, then that's sort of a bit of a different sort of area, and that's something that we can. I can always share how you can challenge how sort of who you need to sort of approach for that. And you're very welcome to drop me an email, and I can share some information around that if that would be useful.
Yeah, that would be, Tom. Thank you. I will, Amelia. Could I just mention, because I'm not sure everybody else on the call might know about this as well, but regionally, I know that there was some funding given to the northeast region of SENDIASs to put some training on for our 12 local authorities. It was just to mention that even though that training was provided, our families of Northumberland were only offered 5 spaces, and it was training on emotional-based school avoidance. But there was 5 spaces across the whole of Northumberland.
So yeah, I mean, so they weren't given money, and so what they do is they pay into a pot. So every service will pay into a pot in order to be able to then put on some additional sort of regional based training, or to use that pot of money however they choose. I know that they would have put on as many spaces as they could have done if they could have afforded to, but it's their own sort of individual budgets that they then have to allocate a small amount of money to, that they then put into a pot that they then consider doing something regionally for. So although it's absolutely not ideal, I think the only way to try and increase that reach is money, is making sure that services have more money to be able to do more work like that where they can.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Over to you, Tom.
Was there any more questions anyone wanted to ask? I can see there's lots in the chat, but if there isn't, then I did want to just ask and just throw it out to the floor. That we do want to, like I say, our role is to produce tools, resources, information, whatever else we need to do in order to be able to empower services to be able to do the best role that they can do, and that includes working positively with their PCF. So from your perspectives, what what could we be doing? Where are the sort of again, that word, pinch points, where where things aren't going as well? What could we then produce in order to support things to improve? Jane, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. It's been really useful to talk to you, Tom. So what would be really useful is some sort of crib sheet. Love a bit of a crib sheet about what PCFs do and what SENDIAS does or doesn't do, or doesn't do, or what our our key roles. A bit like an MOU, but simplified down into like a one page, just for and that would help. I think that would help local families understand what we do and what we don't do as forums. I'm just thinking of our role as a forum, how we work with our local SENDIAS really well. We do like joint workshops and things like that, but we'll always say we're not legally trained. But also, however, I do have a parent rep who's also a staff member of the charity that sort of that I work under, and she is legally trained through the IPSI training. So I just think that's where. So I just think it'd be really useful to say, actually, this is what, as the forum bit. I mean, there's the charity bit. That would be something else I would imagine. But as for the role of the forums and the role of SENDIAS, that would be really useful.
Yeah, really good idea. Just we're trying to do more of that at the moment. I think I definitely don't have a skill in reducing things down to simplicity, and I need to get better at that.
AI, honestly, that's been my lifesaver.
Got our colleague Thaddeus to start with her. She's really good at stuff like that, so maybe I'll have a bit of a chat with her and see what she can do. She's done that with our data reports and sort of reduced them into really snappy things. So I'll have a bit of a chat.
Brilliant, thank you.
Good idea.
Sharuna.
Yeah, I think, Tom, I think we've had this conversation, but I just want to put it out there and maybe ask everyone, what do you do where there is a complete, in many ways it was an instigation by the LA, but you have a complete breakdown in the relationship between the PCF and the IS service. The PCF has tried in many ways, in many different opportunities to try and breach that gap where the breakdown is, but the IS is standing where it is and not willing to budge an inch. And what do you do there? And where once upon a time there was a very good working relationship, the PCF was on the steering board, steering group of the IS services, and now for some whatever reason the PCF has been removed, and we have no idea. So where do we go on from there? Because we're working for the same goal, but yet personality differences are what has caused the breakdown.
I mean, obviously every situation is going to be different, and everything's, it's going to be complex situations in every local area. I mean, fundamentally, if the challenge is personality, then it's always best, I feel, to go back to almost take that out and go back to that sort of policy like the MOUs, which I mentioned before, which sort of take everything back down to brass tacks in terms of, roles, responsibilities, getting everyone on the same page, reminding everyone that fundamentally we're all absolutely here to improve outcomes for children, young people and families through improved services, through improved relationships. And actually, we, remembering that as a baseline, and then sort of building like a more formal policy document that people can sign in order to get everybody back on the same page and go, right, these are going to be, so our role is responsibility, exactly, all those sorts of bits and pieces can be a positive starting point. Obviously every situation is going to be different, depending on sort of the history, and everything else that then can sort of make these things more complex.
I see.
It's also worth talking to your regional advisor, because we might be able to offer some mediation to help rebuild the relationship.
I think so, because what we're seeing is that we're seeing the IS service, parents are noticing where both the IS and the PCF is there, and when the PCF is trying to engage in these public places, the IS services behavior points out to that coldness. And I think that's where the professionality is not being maintained. You can have your differences and you should have differences, but you don't, when it's ultimately we're showing it in front of our customers, for want of a better sweet, quote unquote, our differences, and that's something that I think we probably I think mediation may be required. And how do you go about it? Because
So, I
You
mean, I
talk
think,
to your regional advisor.
yeah, and also it's worth looping in the local authority as well, because at the end of the day, it's their responsibility to make sure that SENDIAS services are doing all that they have to be doing, and that includes best practice. So from both the point of view of a PCF and a SENDIAS, they want to make sure that both are working as they should be doing, because they want, to meet their statutory duties and also best practice duties. So it's worth regional advisors, local authorities, and then sort of boiling things back down, taking any of the past out, and any sort of dynamics out, and getting something written down as a policy document, like an MOU that can be signed. Do you want to jump in? So I think you might be on mute, Sue.
Yes. Can I give you just a bit of advice? Over the years, what we've worked out is that actually, you're absolutely right. People need to be reminded who they're actually working for, and they're working for children and families. There's meant to be, a partnership of working together. If Ofsted and CQC decided to rock up, suddenly you would be their best friend. And in my experience, the best thing to do in a situation comes like that is that you basically speak to your local councillor who's in charge of children and family services. I would speak to the Chief Executive of Children and Family Services and take it to the top and give them your evidence of what is actually happening, that it's not just people clashing, heads, if you like, that here's the evidence that you have as a parent care forum of what is going wrong. And whether you've misinterpreted something or whatever that might be, it doesn't matter. It's on the table. The bottom line of it is the IAS service is meant to be working for children and families. And if that's not happening, there's questions that need to be answered. And if it's not happening face to face, then that's what we do as an organisation. Because they'll want to know who you are when the Ofsted and CQC rock up. Because ultimately, while this sort of loggerheads goes on, the people that are missing out are the children. And that's not negotiable.
Absolutely. I think, you're absolutely right that at the end of the day, when we're talking about all of these sorts of bits and pieces, we're not just saying it for the fun of it. We're saying it's not just, oh yeah, it'd be nice if PCFs and SENDIAS work together. It's the only way to achieve the best possible outcomes for children, young people and families. And that always just needs to be remembered. And that's the best way to sort of and in my experience, I've met very, very few, if none, over the many years I've been working either in local authorities or charities or whatever else, people who don't want that. And actually it is just reminding people that actually, we're not just saying all of this because we want to say all of this. We're saying all of this because this is how you achieve the best possible outcomes for children, young people, families, by improving services. So it is just constantly, like you say, so boiling back down to that, and then thinking, right, what can we do to get there, and sort of getting that down on paper.
In my experience, that if things are going wrong, the people at the top will hear a diluted version of it, and they need to hear it from the bottom, from the front line. And that's the only way change can happen. You work with people as you're going along, but if it's not changing and it's even out of their hands to change, then it has to go to the top. So it might be that the IAS service don't have the power to make changes or to do anything. You don't know the backstory, or you may not know the backstory to it. But actually, if it is at loggerheads, you go to the top, because all of them are accountable for that. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Sue. Tom, did you have any other questions?
Only if there's any more feedback. I mean, like I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a survey to ask everybody as much as possible to feed into any ideas that they would have in terms of sort of resources and tools and things that we could develop. So I will send that around if everyone's happy to fill something in. And unless anyone's got any thoughts they wanted to raise, or any sort of initial, actually what we could really have done with our more case examples is a joint event. is sort of a resource. I mean, the resource that we spoke about a minute ago sounds like a really positive start, but anything like that anyone can think would be a really positive thing would be fantastic. Beverly, did you have anything you wanted to jump in on?
Hi, thank you. Just to say that I feel really disappointed with how things have panned out over the last 16 years, particularly with the support that's there for families. Certainly those that are not able to access SENDIAS or Ask Us as it's called locally, they often have got no voice, and they're obviously the landscape is so unequal for these families. So I just wonder why local authorities and the DfE don't fund adequately the service, because like you said in one of your slides, the savings, the cost saving would be massive, and I think it's just getting worse. And obviously those families that have got money, they pay for private advocates and support. Some of them are they're advised wrongly, and then it makes things worse. And in the heart of all of this are children whose education's suffering. So I think everything needs a good shake up, and we need to have fit for purpose support. You know, I trained as a parent partnership volunteer and did 10 years with them, and you know, I am IPSI law trained, but actually, you know, we have so much to do on so little funding that somewhere something has to change to make sure that everybody gets the same service and the same outcomes. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
I think you're absolutely right. I think, you know, we are in a time of change. I think there is going to be a lot of change over the next period. I don't know how long it's going to last or how quick it's going to go. And you know, we do have an opportunity to feed into that change. I think some of it's going to be challenging, because we know that resource in every local area is tight. I think a lot of it is, as you say, is about messaging and making sure people actually understand the benefits and the impact, which is why we do the work that we do in terms of writing reports, and hopefully making sure that we're getting word out, and hopefully we can utilize some of you guys for that as well, and making sure that we are spreading the word about the work of SENDIAS and the impact it can have. Like I say, there is a chance now to feed into change and try and make things work in a way that is more equitable and equal for families. It's just, it has been an incredibly challenging time. And it is about recognizing that as well, and recognizing that things haven't been working as well as they could or should be for every single family, and making sure that we keep that on the forefront of our mind as things are moving forward, trying to make sure you know, any learning improve things for any other family going forward as they enter the SEND system.
There's a question in the chat, which is there a minimum amount of staff to run a service based on national SEND data?
There isn't, which is a frustration for us. I mean, one of the minimum standards is that the service is able to operate an all year round service that operates Monday to Friday 9 to 5. And that's obviously automatically not going to work if you're a service of less than one, because you're allowed to take sick days and holidays. So you're not going to be able to be open all year round. That is a challenge. There isn't a minimum amount of people, but there are a set of legal duties that SENDIAS services absolutely have to meet. And if they're not meeting those based on the amount of people within their service, then there aren't enough people within that service, and that message needs to keep going up to their commissioners, in order to show them that they need to fund them better and more adequately in order to be able to have the team that they need.
And I had a question come through from somebody who couldn't attend. They were talking about the lack of resource within SENDIAS, leading to more inquiries coming to the forum. And although they've got IPSI trained volunteers and staff, they don't want to tread on toes, but they need to find a way to support parents. Are there any other PCFs who've been able to find a workable solution? They said they have a really good relationship with their SENDIAS.
It's a really tricky one, that, isn't it? Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's great that anybody is able to have that knowledge and understanding to be able to empower and do the work that they're doing. However, you know, SENDIAS services, local authorities have a duty to make sure that they are able to ensure that children, young people and families have access to information, advice and support around their special educational needs and or disabilities. They have to do this through a SENDIAS service. So it's not even so much on stepping on toes, it's that it's a legal duty of the local authority and a responsibility. And you know, they need to be funding their service better, and that needs to be, you know, if there are gaps in the system, it's not, you know, it's fantastic if a PCF is able to support that family. In fact, that's brilliant, and you know, you never want them to go without support. But equally, the message still needs to be going up to those decision makers and those commissioners that they are not fulfilling their duties in the way that they should, by ensuring that all children, young people, and families have access to free impartial information, advice, and support through their local SENDIAS service. So it is a case of sort of looking at both. Well, you know, making sure that everybody has that support regardless of the situation, but also sending that message back up to the local authority and to the commissioners that
Tom, there was a, sorry to interrupt because I know you've only got a couple of minutes, but there was a good case study and I've forgotten which area it was. It was in the southwest where some additional resources had been put in to support SENDIAS services, supporting SEND support area families.
Somerset, yeah.
And is it possible to share that case studies? Because I think that would be a really good thing for forums to see the impact that, and other local areas actually, around the impact that SENDIAS services can have, and how it is actually financially beneficial overall. And I just think that would be a really positive thing to end on, that's all.
That's a really nice, and also, you know, what has been nice recently in this time of change and upheaval is that DfE are very interested in this information as well, and they are taking note of what's happening in Somerset and other areas where there has been better funded services, and we are hoping that they take that on board going forward, and think about how they can, you know, pass that message down to the local authorities to ensure that they are funding services in a way that they need to be. But yeah, it's a really good point, Sarah. We'll make
I'm
sure
really conscious that you've got another meeting in 5 minutes and you probably need to come for a break and everything else, but I just wanted to say a huge thank you.
I just have one question, Tom, because people are asking for your contact details. Are you all right for us to pass them on?
Shall I put them in the chat, or are you happy to see?
That'd be marvellous. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat. Cool. And if I can work this time, I'll try and open the chat without somehow logging off Zoom and carrying on talking to myself.
Yes, please don't log off. I just want to say a huge thanks to all of the participants who kept going and joined in and shared information and questions when you were offline.
Yeah, thank you for covering for me.
And to you, Tom, for coming back and managing to get through your presentation and answer all the questions. Huge thanks to you. You did a sterling job.
I'm glad we could carry it on because I think it's a really important thing. So yeah, and thanks for having me again.
And just huge thanks, everybody. Really appreciate everything that you've done to make this session work. Really appreciated. And huge thanks to Tom and Sarah.